Dr. Loehr, I want to take us down a path, and that path involves a man by the name of Dan Jansen, who was a guest of this podcast about 3 to 4 months ago. If you don't know the story of Dan Jansen, I highly suggest you either check out the podcast that I did with him. He's been on numerous other ones. If you just search his name, there are numerous articles and videos that come up on Dan Jansen. Truly, and not just saying this, this is said by many other people, including Dr. Loehr, one of the most remarkable sports stories you will ever hear, one of the most remarkable stories of resilience, of success when nobody thought he could succeed. Just a truly, truly remarkable story. And it was interesting to me, Dr. Loehr, because when I had Dan on, we ended up talking about what it means to find success and what does it mean to be successful. And I thought he was a good person to ask because he had been chasing a goal for so long that eluded him for many, many years, and that was to capture the Olympic gold. And so it was interesting because, and this is a quote from our podcast. He said, "Even if I hadn't won gold, I know that I could look back today and say I worked as hard as I could work to be as good as I can be. And that's all that really matters. That's really all any coach should ask of you because in the end, there's generally one person on top of the podium or one Super Bowl winner. And so the win is not the most important thing." I'm curious as you compare that quote and present day Dan Jansen and the work that you did with Dan before he won Olympic gold. How does that quote compare to the Dan back then?
Well, I really feel like that quote from Dan is right on the money. I think it's really what it's all about. And for me, to put it simply, is more important than what you achieve is who you became as a person as a consequence of the chase. And a lot of my work with Dan was to make him understand that who he was as a person was far more important than how many Olympic medals that he would win. But he had to do everything possible, and then he could rest, knowing that he did the best that he could to be the best that he could be. And then you can live with that, so that there's no remorse that I should have done this or should have. You turn as many leaves over as humanly possible. So that is the perspective I try to have with every athlete that I have the opportunity to work with, is that it's the person first and the athlete second. And life throws some unbelievable curveballs at people, as it did with Dan. In the death of his sister on the very day of the most important day of his career, when he was supposed to win the 500, his sister Jane, 3 hours before, had died of leukemia, and he wasn't even sure that he should skate. And his dad was there in Calgary, and his dad asked him, "What do you think Jane would want you to do?" And Dan was mortified that he wasn't by her side when she passed. He would have left in an immediate instance if he'd have thought she was in any way in danger of dying. But it just happened. And he responded, "I think she would want me to skate." So he tried to put his skates on. He was in tears. And 10 meters into the race, which he never fell in those situations, he fell hopelessly to the ice. And that began the story of Dan Jansen. And I do believe I've been involved and have read and been in touch with so many people that have had incredible stories. I think Dan Jansen's story is one of the greatest stories in sports history. And it was because of what he faced and what he was up against, and how he was able to rise up in the last race of his life and go against what everyone thought was impossible. That he had 7 people who had faster times than he had ever had in the same event, the 1,000-meter race, that he had come in Albertville 26th 2 years earlier. No one gave him a chance. Not only did he win an Olympic gold medal, but he broke an Olympic record in the process. And that was against all odds in the final race of his Olympic career.
What should people take away from Dan's story?
I think it's the notion that, if you do everything you can, one of the things that and I didn't really have this as a psychologist. I didn't really get into the space. It was nothing that I thought was something that was going to be a big part of my career later on. And it was something I talk about: character. And character, for me, the most important part of character is moral character, the way you treat other people. And Dan's treatment of others, he has this, he's very sensitive. It comes from an unbelievably wonderful, caring family. But his concern for others, his kindness, his perspective, his humility, even though he was the best of the best in the 500 meter, and he broke the world record in the 500 meter. He won so many World Cups and everything else. He was just a guy that just was doing something that he loved. And my message to him was, if you don't win any Olympic medal at all, what do you think about all this time you've spent with speed skating? And he thought about it for a moment. He says, it's been the greatest gift I think I've ever been given. And I said, that is what the conclusion should be, is that you have grown, you become an extraordinary human being as a result of it. And if you win an Olympic medal, and if you were to win an Olympic gold medal, this would just be icing on the cake. And so I got into the character space, and Dan Jansen has a really wonderful, remarkable character. When we were down in the bowels of Lillehammer's big stadium there, and he had lost the 500, and all of his competitors came up to him, and Dan was in tears, and I was there. I flew in. I didn't want him to know I was in the audience because I thought it might put more pressure on him, but I hid, and when he didn't win in the 500, I had to fight through security, and I saw Dan, and I was screaming and yelling, and I said, Dan, it's Jim. And he goes, oh my God, let him through. And we went down into the deepest chambers of the Lillehammer facility, and the respect that all these competitors showed him. Many of them were in tears and said, listen, this should be yours, man. You are the best of the best. This is not the way it should have ended. Of course, I had tears in my eyes as well, but we had 4 days, and that's why I was there, just in case he didn't win the 500, which he was really supposed to. We still had 4 days to win the 1,000, which was a long shot, but he did it. So, but people love being around him. He's just the kind of person you just have a deep appreciation for, and it's because of his treatment of other people on the way to the top.